I'm Angie Jones. I'm director of the University of Toledo Family Business Center. And today we have our second in our three-part webinar series we're doing on employee relations related to COVID. If you weren't online for Tuesday, so 2 days ago, we had Shoemaker, Loop, and Kendrick answer a lot of questions regarding employees and COVID and the whole PPE and issues and what you had to do to protect your employees and how to interpret some of the new laws. Today we have Dr. Jenell Wittmer, who is industrial psychologist and professor of management with the University of Toledo. Very good dear friend of the center, also on our board, works with a lot of our members, so certainly understands family business. And today she's going to be talking about managing employee concerns throughout this process. So if you haven't been on one of our webinars before, I'll quickly run through the process and how we do this. I'll facilitate. I'll give Jenell some time to talk about some issues on the topic, then we'll open it up to questions. If you have any questions, you can use the chat feature. If you're not familiar with Zoom, I don't know that there's anyone that has not been on the Zoom platform yet. But if you haven't, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you can open up the chat box. You can also open up the participant box. It'll show up, should on your right-hand side. In the chat, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in there and I will ask it for you. Also, if you have participants open, if you find your name, there's a raise my hand feature. We will watch that as well. If you feel it's something that you want to ask or it's a little more in-depth than you want to put into the chat box or there's some back and forth to it, certainly feel free to do that, call on that. Other than that, if you could go ahead and keep yourself muted, that really helps with the background noise, and it's up to you if you want your video on or off. I see most everyone is off today. Tuesday, most everyone was on, so that was interesting. So that's how we'll roll, and with that, I will pass it over to Jenell to go ahead and get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie, and thank you for inviting me to do this. I must say, as I was thinking about the topic for today, I kind of went back through some of my emails and some of the things that I've gotten from clients and friends, concerns that they've had as they're trying to get their employees back to work. And some of them are trying to manage the somewhat indefinite prospect that maybe not everyone in their workforce is going to be coming back to work, that they're going to have some remote. So I have a few questions, few common questions that I've gotten from people that I will share with you. But first, I'd kind of like to start with the fact that, as Angie said, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. So I am not a clinical psychologist. I am not qualified to diagnose or probably speak on mental health issues. However, we use the term anxiety pretty generally. And I think that what we're talking about with COVID and people coming back to work in general is an acute anxiety. And so an acute anxiety, you know, about a specific topic or situation is definitely something that affects everybody. And I will kind of define that as we go along. But acute anxiety is something that I would be qualified to talk about, as well as for you as leaders in your organization. That's something that you should be talking about as well. I want to caution us that we need to be careful about not crossing the line into anything that is clinical or trying to help diagnose employees with mental health issues, but it's definitely okay to talk about that kind of acute anxiety. So I want to share with you some ideas, maybe some statistics about maybe why employees are concerned about going back to work. I think if you see employees struggling to go back to work, it's most important that you know why. Usually when I share statistics, they're maybe a year old, possibly 2 years old. I'm really excited to share with you some statistics that are 2 weeks old. For those of us who are quantitative in nature, a 2-week-old statistic is really something that's exciting. So McKinsey did some research. They're a very large firm. They do nationwide research, and they've actually found that 80% of people just liked working from home. They said that they reported enjoying working from home. 41% of people said that they were actually more productive when they were working from home, and 28% of people said that they were just as productive. So while a lot of people might be assuming that the concerns going back to work are related to safety, it is important to be able to decipher those people who are concerned about going back to work because of safety issues, or just because they enjoy working from home and they feel that they're more productive. I will say with those statistics, it's probably maybe silly or obvious to say, but if your organization's ever been thinking about some kind of flexible work option, now's really the time to revisit that. I was looking at some other research from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they surveyed, again, a large national sample and found that it's those, especially the upcoming generations, the Generation Z, the ones that are entering in the workplace now, in order to recruit and retain them, you're going to have some kind of flexible work option, right? That's just what people are looking for now. So from a talent perspective, that's important to consider too. Now, from a safety perspective, these studies have found that 54%, so over half, just over half of workers do have concerns about workplace exposure, okay? So most of the people do have some kind of concern about workplace exposure. Now, the good thing about that is that 71% of people said that they feel confident in the precautions that their organization is taking in order to prevent possible exposure for them, okay? Under half of the people, 43% of people, feel that it's okay for employers to be testing for symptoms. And honestly, I don't know, I wish this statistic had gone more in depth. I don't know if that means temperature checks when you come in, or if that means actually doing a COVID test before people are allowed to come back to work. But 43%, only 43% of people said that it's okay for their employer to do testing. The majority of the people who are uncomfortable with testing are uncomfortable because they feel that their organization is going to use it against them, okay? So of that 43%, 73% of those people said that they feel that their organization is going to be using that information against them in terms of their workload, how they can work, and possibly even their general job security, okay? The vast majority of people, 90% of people, would like for the testing itself of COVID testing to happen outside of an employer's control. So to actually go to some kind of testing site. So part of the anxiety might be because of exposure, but the other part of the anxiety might actually be due to job security issues. Okay, so that's important to consider as well. Overall, the vast majority of people really firmly believe that the most important thing that the organization can do for them is to have complete transparency and communication from leadership about how they're going to handle COVID, how they're going to handle positive testing, how they're going to handle safety precautions, how they're going to handle remote work and flexibility. The majority of people said that they would like to continue. Just over half the people said they'd like to continue remote work, being able to have that flexibility, even if that is maybe only going into the office once a week, right? So that we would still consider going in periodically to be remote work. And this is a really interesting statistic to me. We've been talking about employee wellness programs for decades now. 99% of employees felt that their organizations needed to ramp up wellness efforts. So it's not just keeping me safe, it's making sure I'm healthy too, okay? And on that, I found another statistic that the World Health Organization estimated that for every dollar US employers invest in treating wellness and mental health issues, they actually received $4 back in increased health, overall health, and productivity. So I feel like that's a pretty good investment if you think about it. So I'm done, throwing statistics at you, but basically I wanted to give you the idea of overall across the nation, this is kind of how people are feeling. Now I want to talk about, before I get to some other questions, I wanted to get back to those emails, those questions that I had gotten from friends and from clients. Basically, I have three main questions that people have asked me. The first of them is, what is the best way to gauge employee concerns and feelings about coming back to work or not coming back to work, okay? I like to think of this shift to back to work as well as the shift going remote as change management, okay? If any of you are familiar with change management, you know that it's a pretty steep struggle. People are resistant to change. You need to have, the best practice for change management is a slow evolution of change, bringing in small changes over a period of time. Well, we can throw that out the window. This has been, instead of an evolution, this has been a revolution, right? We are having to implement massive modifications very, very quickly. And so it's just not going to be easy. To me, in my opinion, the most important, the number one focus of employers right now should be employee engagement, okay? So what that means in this sense is really understanding employees' concerns at the most granular level, okay? The very, as specific as you possibly can get. Their sentiments about COVID, their challenges in returning back to the workplace, how to keep the workplace safe, and then we have to address that feedback. So a lot of people have said, well, I should send out a survey to my employees. A survey is great. It's a really quick way to get information from people, how they're feeling, what their thoughts are, maybe even if they have recommendations, but it's not enough. A survey is not enough. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of addressing the feedback. The research on survey data, employee engagement surveys, job satisfaction surveys in organizations for the last few decades has been pretty clear. Those surveys actually do a detriment to employee engagement and satisfaction and commitment if employers do not take visible action to address the feedback, okay? So if you ask me how I'm doing and what I think and what I want, but then you don't do anything with it, it's actually gonna harm our relationship rather than help it, okay? So you have to be prepared if you're going to send out a survey about employee concerns, how they're feeling, what they want, you have to be prepared to do something with it, okay? So again, to circle back, a survey is great, but it's not enough. It's too high level, it's not high touch enough, okay? So I really think that that's when individual supervisors, managers, leaders come in to the picture, asking questions of employees, being there to not just ask the questions, but really follow up on them individually, again, at that most granular level. Managers and supervisors want to ask empathetic questions like, how are you feeling? What are your concerns? But they also want to ask challenging questions like logistical questions. How are you going to handle this? What is your plan for this? Any question, whether or not it's survey or if it's coming from a leader or a manager, I really cannot emphasize enough the importance of it coming from genuine concern and curiosity. The tone of it comes off much different if it is, well, we're asking all the employees what they think about this. Well, I'm supposed to ask you how you feel about this, right? That tone of I'm being forced to do this, or is it a requirement of me, is much, much different than, hey, let's have a conversation about how you feel. I'm really genuinely concerned about the welfare and the mental health and the concerns and anxiety of my employees, okay? Interestingly enough, I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago now about how the skill set of the American manager is changing because of this. And they came up with a new term, at least new to me, I should say, called sifting, okay? Sifting. It's part of a decision-making process, part of your analytical skills, right? It's the ability to take in information and sift through it to determine what is important and what is not important, what needs to be addressed and what doesn't need to be addressed. But here's the key to it, sifting. You have to sift through that information and process it before you have any response or judgment. Now in my training, I do a lot of work in emotional intelligence. That before response or judgment is part of emotional intelligence, right? I need to fully listen to you and hear what you're saying before I jump in and provide you with my opinion, but put it in a sense of being analytical and problem solving for your employees. We really need to take in all of the information before we make decisions with it, before we give our opinion or response to it. And we need to make sure that we are getting feedback and making the process of making these really difficult decisions for employees participatory, that we're really hearing them. At the end of the day, the answers are not clear, all right? Look at the statistics that I provided you. I kept saying a little more than half, a little less than half. People are not in agreement here, okay? So trying to put a one-size-fits-all approach to employees coming back, half of your employees are going to be upset. That's just how it's going to be. So as much as you can, individualize it, okay? But recognize that we have to listen and understand employee concerns. Again, the answers are not clear, they're not clean. We don't have any experience here, so we just cannot make quick judgments, okay? So again, that's kind of my response to what is the best way to engage employee concerns. Making sure that you are talking to them, not just at a high level survey type, but really at the individual and most granular level. I'll pause there in case there's any questions about that response to that question coming up before I move to the next common question. Angie?
I didn't see any specific, we do have a few questions come in, but I think we can wait till later. There's nothing specific on that issue.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so I'll move to my next most common question that I'm receiving. And this was a big one. What happens when people want to come, some people want to come back and other people don't? Okay, what do I do with that? I've got, again, half the people who want to come back and half the people who don't. The fact of the matter is that is going to happen. Some people are going to have medical issues. Some people are going to have childcare issues. Other people are going to have other issues. Maybe it is a mental health issue or anxiety, whatever it might be. So the potential here with some people wanting to come back and other people not wanting to come back, the potential for problems here is endless. Really, they are. Just to name a few of them, we've got communication issues across people working from home and other people not working from home. Also, I've already heard of people in the office having communication issues because we are not crossing each other's paths as much. We're just supposed to be doing that whole socially distancing thing where we go into our workspace and kind of shut the door or close ourselves off. So we're really likely to have some communication issues. We're going to have some issues of fairness and bias. Why is it fair for this person to do this and another person to do something different? We're going to have issues with engagement. We're going to have productivity issues. For all of these issues, to answer as briefly and as quickly as possible, proactive communication is most important here. Open communication is key here, all right? Encourage that healthy conflict. My motto for this question is respect and discuss how it impacts us. Respect and discuss how it impacts us. If someone is doing something or working in a way that doesn't work for you, it's causing problems for you, as a leader, we want to make sure for all employees, we are encouraging respect and then discussing how it impacts us. It's important to know that it is impacting people. It's important to be able to talk about that. But we have to, and this is another key phrase here, we have to be able to share feelings without sharing opinions. Okay, so I'll pause and let that sink in. We have to be able to share feelings without sharing opinions. I cannot remember in my lifetime there being any more of a contentious topic. COVID-19, can you think of any more contentious topic? People don't agree. People think it's a hoax. People think it's political. People think there's the conspiracy theories are endless, right? So we have to be able to share feelings without sharing opinions. And we have to be able to respect and discuss how it impacts us. There is a social psychology theory that I have found to be probably one of the most useful theories in my professional and personal life. It's called the fundamental attribution error. Okay, the fundamental attribution error. Basically what that means is if somebody does something bad, if somebody has poor behavior, we automatically assume it's because of them as a person. If somebody cuts us off while we're driving on the freeway, we automatically assume that that person is a jerk, that that person doesn't know how to drive. I was going to make a joke that that person's from Michigan, but I won't make that joke. My husband's from Michigan, so I'm allowed to make that joke, right? But the point of the matter is the fundamental attribution error means that we are attributing someone's behavior to them as a person, okay? When the fact of the matter is there's so many other situational things going on right now that could be the cause of someone's performance, the reason they're not at work, the reason that their communication is delayed, the reason that they're not engaged as much as they used to be, whatever it might be. So don't assume the worst. Don't assume that someone's behavior is because of them as a person. Respect and discuss how it impacts us. That's really the only way that we're going to get through this from an employee relations standpoint and from employees working together. Okay, I'll move on to the third and last general question that I've heard very frequently. Should individual managers be handling employee concerns, or should that be an organizational level, organizational leadership, or even an HR type of issue? The answer is all of the above, okay? It's extremely important to have communication from the top down. You wanna have the communication from the top down about procedures, about training, about resources, about how we're gonna keep everybody safe, how we're gonna standardize things, what the policies, what the procedures are, right? But there's also the importance of having a little bit more of a human touch, okay? That's where the individual managers and leaders come in. Now, if any of you read the LinkedIn article that I wrote right at the beginning of the shutdown, I talked about the fact that it doesn't necessarily need to be high frequency. We don't want to micromanage people. We don't want to demand a lot of their time. So we're not looking for high frequency communication from managers, but rather high quality. Those ones where they're being empathetic, they're asking empathetic questions, and they're really listening, okay? But both from a leader and an organizational standpoint, I think it's really important to understand what creates anxiety. If that's what we're talking about, employee concern or employee anxiety. Anxiety is where the level of burdens that someone has and the level of coping ability that someone has are not equal, right? There's just kind of that tipping point. If anyone experiences more burdens than they have coping ability, they're going to have stress or anxiety. It's not that acute anxiety is not necessarily a mental health problem. So again, that's something that employers should be comfortable discussing and having a conversation about. The fact that maybe people have too much on their plate right now. It's not just work, but it's personal, it's family, it's health, it's children, you know, all of those things. And it is not our job as an organization, as a leader, to take away burdens, but it is our job to help with coping ability, okay? So if you want to think of it in more of a professional term rather than burden and coping ability, think of it in terms of the demands that someone has on them, maybe job demands, the stressors, the things they have to accomplish, and the resources that an organization can provide, right? We're not going to take away job demands. We're not going to say, oh, you don't have to accomplish this, you don't have to do this, don't worry about it. We're going to provide more resources, okay? So from a, managing employee concerns, the best bet that we can have both from an organizational standpoint as well as an individual manager standpoint, provide more resources. Those resources could be actual resources from, PPE. They could be resources from trainings, people gain knowledge. It might also just be a support system, okay? So, think broadly in terms of resources. Okay, Angie.
Yes, I have a question. So
Yes.
In addition to providing resources, is there anything else that leaders can do to support employees emotionally?
Yes. So the cornerstone of a lot of what I do, and if you've worked with me before, I'm sure that you've heard this term, I said it earlier, emotional intelligence, okay? If you're not familiar with the term emotional intelligence, I like to think of it colloquially as kind of social skills on steroids. It's not only my ability to relate to other people, but it's also my ability to understand myself, okay? So do I understand myself? Can I control myself and how I behave? And can I meet people where they need to be met? You know, can I provide people with the things that they need? Now, if we're talking about emotional intelligence and being able to read people, understand how they're feeling, this is a whole new ballgame, right? We have to read people's emotions and nonverbals through a mask. We have no experience there, right? We have to manage emotions from a distance. We don't have any experience there. We have to manage personal, familial, organizational, communal, global safety concerns. We don't have any experience there. So my best recommendation for individual leaders to meet employees where they need to be met emotionally is to amp up the emotional intelligence. Be much more direct and much more intentional about sharing emotions in a very verbal way, because we are missing a lot of the nonverbals when we are remote, and we're certainly missing them when we have the mask on. I actually saw a woman yesterday and she goes, "Oh, I feel so silly for smiling at you through my mask." And I said, "Don't, smile bigger, because then I can see it in your eyes," right? We have to like exaggerate everything that we're doing now. And that really is my recommendation. Make sure that the feelings and the emotions that you're sharing are exaggerated, not in a, you know, lack of emotional maturity way, but in a way that you're really displaying them and you're talking about them in a very verbal way. Be a role model for it. If you're sharing your concerns or you're trying to be empathetic, then people are going to be a little bit more open and feel like you're emotionally supporting them more.
Okay, thank you. So how can leaders then, though, show the empathy to their employees, but then still hold them accountable?
That's a big one. I mean, that is definitely a big one. So let's stick on that emotional intelligence, and let's stick on the idea of empathy, because empathy is part of emotional intelligence. I tell people quite frequently, and this is pre-COVID, I'm starting to loathe that term pre-COVID, but there is a big difference between empathy and sympathy, okay? Big difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is where you are being objective. You are really understanding where someone is coming from. You're trying to put yourself in their shoes, okay? You're trying to understand their emotions. Sympathy is taking on someone else's emotions. So if somebody comes to you with their anxiety and their concern and their struggles, you actually take it on, okay? Now, this is a way that most people can understand. When you take on someone else's emotions, right, then you're almost kind of stealing their thunder, right? They're coming to you for help, for assistance, for concern, and then you're making it about you, right? We don't need to add any more emotions to ourselves. We already have our own, okay? So in order to be empathetic, you have to be objective. Being empathetic means that you don't have a solution. You're not just providing a solution to people. It means listening. It means saying, I can understand how you can feel that way. So how can we show empathy but still hold employees accountable? Focus on the response to the problem, on your response to the problem, not on the problem itself. Do not take on responsibility for someone else's actions, someone else's feelings, right? Focus on their response. So let's say someone is anxious or concerned about something, right? Engage that person, right? How can you help that person resolve their own problem? So if we are trying to hold people accountable, right, we have to take ourselves out of the picture and help walk them through that problem, okay? So we can still be empathetic and understand where they're coming from while not getting ourselves actually involved in their issue. Does that make sense? Hopefully. One other thing I want to say with that, sorry, Angie, I know I'm interrupting you at this point. Again, I think this is a good place to emphasize, again, sharing feelings and not opinions. If somebody is coming to you with an issue or a problem, or they're having a performance issue, we don't need to provide our opinion, right? We can share our feelings about it, but we don't need to provide our opinion. COVID in and of itself is not only anxiety provoking, but it's political again. So people are going to have strong opinions when they come to us, and that is not an opportunity for us to engage in debate. It's an opportunity for us to listen. We don't have to agree with everything that everyone is saying to us. We do not have to put our own opinions on our employees or our coworkers. We can just be a good listener.
Any advice for the leaders on dealing with employees who are maybe underperforming during this time? Do you deal with them the same as you would typically advise, or do we adjust a little bit for what we're going through? Either physically underperforming, either physically in the office or virtually.
Okay. That's also a great question, and it goes well with the previous question. My answer is we should be engaging them the same way that we always have been, except that I don't know that everyone's always been doing a good job of that. So I think that providing people with good, solid, critical feedback has never been a manager's favorite thing to do. A lot of leaders shy away from that. So it's good to kind of re-emphasize what are some of the best practices. And again, I like that it's added whether they're underperforming while they're physically at work or whether they're remotely. It really can be the same. As leaders, we tend to be the problem solvers. We tend to be the advice givers. We tend to direct people's behavior. Again, we need to be very careful about making assumptions or projecting our own opinions or our own solutions onto others, okay? A lot of times when someone is underperforming, we make an assumption about why they're underperforming. Maybe we think it's because they're not working hard enough. Maybe we think it's because they're lacking skills. But the fact of the matter is there's so many other reasons why someone could be underperforming that has nothing to do with effort or skills. So we really need to focus on the underperformance, the behavior or the results, and not on the underperformer, not on the personal characteristics or the work effort. Now, that's not to say that all underperformance is due to situational constraints. It very well could be because of work effort or maybe a lack of skills. I've had leaders tell me that employees have come out of the woodwork in the last several months saying, I'm not as tech savvy as I thought I was. I can't figure this out. And that's good that people are open to that. But underperformance could simply be because of a lack of skill that we could help someone with. So when we're giving feedback, we really want to focus on the behavior or the result, not on the person or not on the personal characteristics. We need to get down to the bottom of it and find out why is this person underperforming. Again, this requires open and honest communication. If you're a good, solid leader who has a relationship with your employees, who has that history of open communication, hopefully they will feel free to tell you with what they are struggling with. And they may not know. They actually may not know what they're struggling with. So there's kind of an art to figuring out, is it this? What can I help you with? So there is some negotiation, Angie, like you said. Is there a different negotiation that normally happens? And I would say maybe there might be a different negotiation. One of the things that I would say is different is that we need to start questioning our goals, okay? A lot of times as leaders, we put our own metrics to what we want someone to accomplish, right? I want it on time and I want it perfect and I want it this way. And we put our own expectations, which as a leader is okay to do. But I think it's really important to take a step back and determine what is the most important metric for success, right? Is the metric for success that it's on time? Is the metric for success that it is, you know, done perfectly, that we're providing a lot of options? And perhaps that's a conversation that we can have with the employees where we can get the most important or highest priority metric for success.
Great. So I've had a few questions about the back to school anxiety. It's something that employees are struggling with, and then something employers or leaders are struggling with, maybe kind of going back to that fairness and bias that you talked about earlier. So do you
Sure.
have any tips or thoughts on either from the employer standpoint and how to deal with employees that are kind of going through this, and then employees when they're trying to decide, do we do in person, do we do virtual? And I think there's a lot of talk of you might start one way and then in a week it's going to be completely different.
Well, and in all honesty, we were talking about this before before we started the webinar. Hey, everybody! I'm in the same boat as you. I have 3 school-age children, and this is definitely not to say that the schools aren't doing everything to their ability. They really are, but the fact of the matter is, we still don't know what's going to happen, right? And it could change on a dime, and it did, and we did it before. Okay, so remember, we've done this before. We've already overcome switching our children from in-person to remote and had to figure out the work schedules. Was it difficult? Absolutely, but we adjusted. And if you want to continue to be an employer of choice, you're going to adjust with your employees. That is just really the bottom line. You're going to manage those issues of bias. I'm not going to throw the word favoritism out there because it's not playing favorites. But we're going to acknowledge it and openly talk about it. If employees who are there physically at work have an issue with some employees working remotely, then we just need to have a discussion about it. And again, if you're going to retain your best quality people, you're just going to have to be flexible on that school thing, because we all have to be flexible on the school thing. We are all working at this, on this at the same time. I think that it's important to recognize that if students are coming home again, if you're working remotely, to have those discussions about, is it important for you to be logged in at 8 a.m. or does 9 a.m. work, right? Or can I work for 2-3 hours in the afternoon and then work in the evening again so that I can manage my kids' schedules? Have that conversation as much as possible. Now, some of you may be employers where it is absolutely necessary that your employees are at work, okay? That is also a discussion to have with your employees. If you absolutely 100% need them physically there at work, then that is certainly a discussion to have. Now, you add anxiety to that as well, right? You have to manage parents' fear, right? Every time they're going to get a phone call, they're going to jump and think, I need to go pick up my kid. Schools are managing fear, right? As soon as a kid sneezes, they're going to be in quarantine. We all have to talk openly and honestly about that anxiety and that fear, because anyone who has children, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, and someone brought up in the chat feature that another kind of component of it is employees are afraid of maybe their coworkers who have kids that are in school because they could be more exposed to the virus.
Absolutely.
Work with them.
And so there's just not enough data out there yet for anyone to say anything conclusively. So, and again, there's conspiracy theories, there's statistics, there's research studies. I saw a really interesting thing. We keep talking about quote unquote science, and I'm certainly not trying to get into that discussion, but it's evolving. All of these things are continuously evolving, the new information that we have out there. And so if that is in fact a fear that you have, you are working with a number of people with school-age children who are back in school, that is definitely something to talk about and how you can manage it. Maybe there are stricter physical distancing requirements for those people. Maybe they have to go through a different requirements to be screened to come into the workplace. There are a number of solutions that can be put forth, but none of those solutions are going to be put forth if people don't talk about them.
Yeah, so that kind of goes along with another question that I had, which I think kind of the theme of what I've been hearing is transparent, open, quality communication. But then if an employee does feel anxious about such an, or anything really, and
Yeah.
scared about COVID, what should they do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we as leaders need to know our limits of our capabilities. I have a tremendous amount of resources that I can share with people. I think that this is a really important time for organizations to realize that they're not just providing a physically safe environment, they need to provide a mentally safe environment. If we want people to be productive, then we need to make sure that they are both physically and psychologically safe at work. And so they need to have the ability to share those concerns and be open with them, as we said. But know that it's kind of, it's a normal type of reaction for people to be anxious. And so we need to be very careful as leaders not to judge, but we also need to know the limits of our ability to deal with some of those concerns. So now's a really good time to provide some additional training to people on mental health and the emotional aspects of working during a pandemic. There are plenty of resources out there that you can provide to employees. There are helplines and more information. And so the more information that people have, I think the more secure they feel. But sometimes it might be a matter of just having a good listening ear, but another time it might actually be, okay, we need to refer this person out. We need to refer this person to some additional resources.
Great. I had one last question that came through. What can leaders do to engage employees throughout this, especially, and you kind of alluded to earlier that some are working remotely, some are in the office. You're not walking past each other as much as you used to, so communication's down. So what can leaders do to encourage that employee engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, with the change management, and which is what we are doing right now in a large sense, that employee engagement is one of the most important things that we can be doing. First of all, I'd really love to change the term social distancing to physical distancing. Like that's something that I try to keep putting out there. We are social beings. We are absolutely social beings. Most of the people, if I look back at the survey data, most people who say that they want to come back to work, it's because of this social engagement and connection. It's not because, oh, my kids are bugging me in the background, or I need my workspace, or I need another, screen to work on. It's because I need that social engagement. I was talking to someone earlier this week who was really upset because this was her first week back to work. And she was so excited to have that same kind of feeling that, she had before, and she missed all of her coworkers. And that's one of the things that she loved about work the most. And it was kind of like a wave high, and everybody kind of backed away from each other and went into their workspaces and didn't really talk. So we do need to proactively engage with people, both who are in the office and those people who are outside, okay? So it's not just an issue for remote workers. We have to go above and beyond. My suggestion, a lot of organizations were doing this in the very beginning of the shutdown, but they kind of let it trickle off. Now's a good time to re-engage this, especially for people who are, some are working remotely and some are working physically present at the workplace. Have a kind of Zoom or otherwise social get together, happy hour, whatever it might be. Allow some social time for work. Maybe have a lunch hour where everybody is coming together. I really try to avoid group emails and group text threads, but it might be good in the morning to send out an email and say, all right, everybody get on this platform, whether or not you can use instant message, text, whatever other platform you're using, and, you know, share something, you know, the best thing about your morning, or have a different subject every day. Really go above and beyond so that people are sharing what's going on with them. I was on a really, really funny Zoom meeting where, and you have to know people, okay? So it was a little less professional, but everybody said, all right, let's see what everybody's wearing on the bottom, right? So like everybody's in this Zoom meeting, and that's the whole joke, that people are wearing like professional dress up top, but then wearing sweatpants on the bottom, or, you know, raise your hand, how many people are wearing shoes right now? So it just kind of trying to make it lighthearted and connect people, but you really do have to go above and beyond to make that happen.
Yeah, we won't ask everyone that right now.
Thanks.
Although I did
Wearing professional dress.
Yes. I had one more question. So what's the best way to address an employee in the workplace, or even maybe a customer or someone comes in that refuses to wear the mask?
Oh, that's a great question. So most organizations are able to kind of stick by the letter of the law. By the way, I meant to mention, and then this brought it up, I looked through a few days ago the CDC's recommendation for going back to work. It's like an 8-page form of all of these things. And this is the Center for Disease Control, so I understand they're talking about someone's physical health, but nowhere in there did it talk about addressing employee concerns. Nowhere in there did it talk about anxiety or emotional health or anything like that. And the fact of the matter is, our emotions drive everything that we do. So if we are expecting people to follow these guidelines and to stay physically distancing and wear the mask and wash their hands and follow all these protocols, there needs to be some kind of emotional setup for that, some kind of buy-in that we're creating from them. Most organizations, like I said, can stick behind following the letter of the law. And certainly here in the state of Ohio, we are requiring masks unless someone has some kind of physical, medical reason for not. And I would personally ask, if I'm having visitors to my organization, what I would like to do and what I would recommend to do is send out some kind of notification for what the requirements are within your organization, and ask if there's any reason that those people can't fulfill them. If in fact they say that they can't fulfill them, then they would need to provide some kind of medical documentation to that effect. So really here, the legal aspect of it helps us to stay fair and impartial across people. The fact that the state of Ohio is saying that you have to have them is just, it makes it a lot easier. It's not up to an organization's discretion when they're using it. So it's a little bit more streamlined, but I anticipate in the future, right? I hope, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, that in the future, the state is not going to mandate that, and that it will be up to the discretion of the employer. And so it's really important for employers to create a policy, right? You need to have an employer policy about what we expect visitors to do, what we expect guests to do, and again, be very vocal and upfront about what those policies are.
Okay, thank you. And we covered some of that too on our webinar on Path to.
Yes.
So yeah. I will ask Kirsten to put the links in the chat. So that was all of our questions. I thought this was fabulous. I have pages of notes, lots of really good information. So thank you so much, Jenell, for doing this for us.
You're quite welcome.
A few kind of updates. We did record this and we will put it on our YouTube site. Again, Kirsten will put those links in the chat. So she'll actually put all of our social media links there. We would love for you to follow us, connect with us, engage with us, and most importantly, let us know what's on your mind. And that's what we do best, is be responsive to our members. So if there's a topic that you're struggling with and you need us to help find resources, experts, content for you, we will absolutely do that. So certainly reach out to me, Kirsten, Emily, anyone. Our next webinar is Tuesday the 18th Carrie Urrutia and Emily Vassar, both who have presented with the center multiple times, will be talking about employment law liabilities. So certainly that's one you'll want to attend and even share that with your HR people as well. Quick little plug for the center and Jenell here. Jenell is wrapping up our third leadership development cohort. It is where a group of almost like an affinity group of cohort people come together and talk about leadership issues in a family business. Some of the things that you covered today, I know we talk about in the session, giving feedback, morale, emotional intelligence, and we've had phenomenal reviews on all three of those cohorts. And we typically would start it in September, although we put with COVID, we put a hold on it. But the feedback that I'm getting is don't do that. The virtual, we've had to switch this last one to the hybrid between in-person and virtual, and that's working out well. So I'm working with Jenell to see what kind of programming that we can come up with. So if that's something you might be interested in, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know some feedback on if you'd be willing to do it virtually, any thoughts you would have. It includes some coaching sessions, which are extremely valuable, but that's hopefully something that we'll roll out later this fall as well too. So I think that's everything. Thank you everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again on the 18th.
Angie, one quick thing. I had mentioned that there are some resources out there that employers can publish and provide and push out to employees just about more information about COVID, what will happen, testing, but also mental health, what to do with stress and building resistance and resilience. So I will share those with you. I will send them to you, and if you'd like to post them or send them out to the members, that would be fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.